Welcome, welcome, welcome to X-Oriente, the new voice of brotherhood. I am 50% of your host, Eric Diamond.
I am the other 50% of your host, Jason Van Dyke. Hello.
Hi. So, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, summer, man.
Yeah.
It was great. I did some traveling. I went to visit family in Wisconsin and, stayed busy. I've work hasn't slowed down. God bless. No lodges are meeting. Well, they didn't meet for a while. Now they're meeting virtually, but didn't slow me down at all. In fact, I probably got busier. So it's been actually a pretty great and productive summer.
Yeah.
How about you?
I've been crazy busy as well. I think part of, it's interesting. Like we kind of came out and said, well, we're not going to do a show unless we have something to talk about. And it's been really tough. I have to say, it's been really tough to find things to talk about in an era where you're not meeting, you're not, there aren't any events.
Yeah, right.
People aren't really talking about masonry all that much, except for, can we go back yet? Can we, is it time yet? Do we have to wear a mask? Do we have to
How about now?
Can we meet virtually? Yeah. Can we do degrees?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Hi, Jeff.
I know exactly
Jeff
what you're
joined
us. Hi. Jeff.
But I'm starting to get like another wind. I'm starting to get like a second wind. I feel like there's a lot.
I think so too.
There's a lot going on in the country.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on that is, where masonry can I don't know if it's necessarily have a role to play specifically, but
guide and inform, maybe.
Yeah, maybe something like that. I think.
All right, I'll buy that.
I spent a lot of time. Part of my job now is I write a lot of COVID papers, which is depressing.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, the economy, it's going to get worse. And
right. How to take advantage of your spot in a terrible economy.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's literally like writing how to survive a zombie apocalypse. Kill your friends and neighbors.
It kind of is.
I know, absolutely.
How to decide which ones to keep and which ones to, which
discard
ones to
your
let
aunt.
In the shelter and
how to discard your aunt without causing hurt feelings.
That's right.
I like that.
Yeah, but I think we're going to get back. I think we want to do a show on sort of laughter and masonry.
Yep.
And Masonic parody. I think we want to, maybe revisit some stuff around the working tools. Kind of get in touch with them. I think we also want to, maybe talk a little bit more about logical fallacies, cognitive bias. I mean, I'd say we almost have beaten the social media thing to death, but it's still a problem.
We haven't. Yeah.
Apparently we haven't. So we're gonna try to tackle that, but I want to do that in a slightly different way. Like I feel like we've been doing it the same way for a while, and pretty much everybody on the internet, and it culminated. I think it was last week where the Grand Master of New York. Yeah. Basically
brought the smackdown.
It brought the smackdown.
I believe he used red lettering. He actually used red lettering in his
which is a hard typewriter ribbon to get.
Right. Right. You got to be wealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those ribbons don't come cheap.
Those ribbons do not come cheap.
No, not at all.
But there was something that it kind of like I think the overall message was spot on. The one thing that I was a little concerned about was that, they were saying, well, Masons shouldn't discuss politics and religion in public or in private. Like the fact that you're a Mason means that you should avoid those subjects. And I did take a little bit of disagreement with that. I feel like Masonry teaches us how to have those kind of conversations to be able to disagree without being disagreeable. Right. And so we can maybe explore that a little bit more in a future episode.
I agree. I think so.
And then, but there was something else about social media. One of them is that, for a while now, we've been trying to wean ourselves off of Facebook, and
I would love to.
Yeah. And
although I never post anymore. I really don't. I read, I lurk like nobody's business, but I don't.
I'm trying to spend less time there. I don't think
Mhm.
I think like a little check in with, or with certain people, like my Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah,
group, which is
nice.
a COVID byproduct in my
Right,
life.
right.
I use that as a way
I
to
have a
communicate.
Cthulhu group. Yeah,
Yeah, I use that as
absolutely.
a way to communicate with my players, but I'm
Sure.
trying not to rely on it because I
Hmm.
just feel like I'm not I'm not agreeing with the direction it's going.
Yeah, I agree.
So, what that means for you guys, if you're here, is that in a couple of episodes. Right now, we're simulcasting. I don't know how long that's going to last. We might crash or something like that. But we're actually simulcasting both to YouTube and to Facebook. So we'll continue to do that for a while, as long as we can, and then eventually we're going to go over to Facebook to YouTube. So if you're on Facebook and you try to pick up the show live, uh, go over to YouTube to our channel. I will put
Hmm.
a link in the show notes.
On
Hit
Facebook.
on yeah
Hmm.
on
And our
Facebook and the
website.
blog.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
Subscribe on YouTube. Hit the bell so that you're notified of new episodes, and we'll all make the switch together. I think it'll be good.
There you go. Yeah.
But today, this episode, we wanted to talk about writing, and
Subject near and dear to my heart.
absolutely. So why are you qualified to talk about writing? Who
I'm
do you
not.
think you are?
Right. Here's the best part. I'm not. I'm just some schmo. You know, it's funny because this is a topic that I really wanted to talk about, and I think I want to talk about it because in the last few years, editing our magazine for our Grand Lodge, I have to go out there and kind of pound the pavement to get content for it, and trying to convince people to write can be difficult. And there's a lot of coaxing involved, and a lot of, I know it's a deadline. I know, you don't like to write. I know that you don't write, quote
Why do
unquote.
you think that is? Why do you think it's so difficult?
Listen, I think it's something that, it is a skill, and with any skill, you have to practice it. And if you don't, it atrophies. And so sometimes, and people may have bad experiences with writing in school. I know I did, but I had good experiences as well, which I now prefer to draw on. Um, and so like, writing can be difficult. It can be, it can be intimidating. And so I want to take away some of the stigma. I want to talk in depth about a process,
Mm-hmm.
because I know people think of that stuff and they're like, oh, here comes the arty crap. And it kind of is, to be honest. But there's a process. There is a way to attack this
Mm-hmm.
that's better than, that's better than just going in without a plan.
But before we
I
get
think
to
there are
that,
very few writers that can do that.
yeah, and I agree, and I think that's a great approach. I think before we get to that, how it's funny you said arty crap, and
Well, okay, so here's the thing, right?
wait, but
So,
I took a different art. Like I was
oh
thinking Art
yeah,
de
yeah.
Hoyos,
Oh, right,
right?
yeah, right,
And
exactly.
I
Well, sure,
and so
sure.
here's what I was thinking. Like I know that when I first got into masonry, my first thought was who the hell am I to write
Right.
anything? Like what
That's exactly right.
qualifies me? I'm not a
Right.
past master or a 33rd or an Art de Hoyos or a
Right.
Chris Hodap or a
So I think that's another really really common argument about I don't want to write. And the thing is that you're not their competition. You're not going to write anything that's going to come close to what they're writing. And you shouldn't. You shouldn't try and write Morals and Dogma 2, the Revenge of the Archivist. That's not your
the Dogma
bailiwick.
ing.
The dogmaing, exactly. That's just it's not going to happen for you in that way. But here's the thing: is that you still have a lot of other good stuff to say. There's a lot that you can bring to the table. you just have to find out what's unique about your voice, what's unique about the things that you're bringing to the table. And that's not to say you can't write, morals and dogma to the moraling later in life when you've got a lot more under your coat. But but I think starting off, there's so many other things to write about. Let me just let me read this real quick. It's something that I wrote as part of my reflection on this stuff, and I think this is another big stumbling point for people, which is that there are few things in life that are more complex and riddled with technical language than Freemasonry. Plus, you have to hold back explanation when you're writing stuff. You have to hold back a lot of explanation of what you're writing about because of your ritual obligations, because you can't talk about a big chunk, arguably the most important chunk of Freemasonry. You can't talk about it. So how do you write about it, right?
Jeff
And how do you
points
do
that
it
out
in
in
a
Wisconsin.
meaningful way?
They're not allowed to write out very much about the craft.
That's right. And I think that there's a way around that. And I think that again, it doesn't have to be esoterics. It just write about something that you love. Listen, you can write about antiques, Masonic antiques, right? Dudley watches are a big collector's item. Why are they special? What do you know about them? Tell me about it. Tell me what they're worth. Tell me what, give me all the goo. Give me the Antiques Roadshow on that stuff. I want to know those things. Write about haberdashery. Are you really into, custom tailored suits? Are you really into proper formal wear and things like that? And tell us about that stuff. That's interesting. Other Masons want to know about that stuff. That's guy stuff. It's tangentially related to Masonry. So we want to know about it, or are you a big proponent of, hey, let's just wear t-shirts and shorts to lodge? Tell me why. What do you get out of it? What drives you through that? If you write about that, I'm interested. I'll read that. Write about a mentor of yours. Write about a role model that you have that has something to do with Masonry. Why did you join? Right? When you joined, who took you under their wing and meant something to you? And how did that manifest later in your life? Right? That's a compelling story to me, because it says a lot about you and it says a lot about somebody else. Write about another philosophy that maybe you studied in school that you studied in school that you thought was really interesting, and how it applies maybe with Masonry. How do you fit those things together? All of that stuff. That's just a few things off the top of my head. Those are a couple things that you can write that are interesting, that are compelling to other people. That isn't just, hey, what's the sacred feminine in the Nine of Cups? I don't care. Come on. So like,
I'm laughing because you flipped the bird. So the people on the people in the podcast part of this are not gonna catch that, but
they aren't gonna catch that.
But I can see the passions are inflamed here.
Right. You can see how irritated I get. Just write. And the other thing is, just write, and write often. Write visually. Try and close your eyes when you're writing and imagine, what you're writing about, and then try and tell that to the person who's reading it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Write like you're reading is a weird term, and I've heard that before from several authors that write. They write with the mindset that they're reading that, which is really weird to think about, but it makes sense once you start writing something.
So like reading it, when you say reading it, do you mean like
put yourself in your audience's shoes, right?
So you're reading it like with your pipe in front of the fire, or you're reading it out loud, or is it
no? You're reading it in your head. You're writing it. You're writing it as one would be reading it, meaning your empathy, everything that you're putting into that, is your mindset is just about your reader. Okay. So it's totally directed that way. Mm-hmm. It's just a mindset thing. And I actually, if there are guys out there, and I know that we've got a bunch of people who are really into like Zen Buddhism and meditation practices and things like that. It's a really interesting meditative practice is to write like you're the reader. you've got to break that down. You've got to think about that, meditate on it, understand what that means, and then put it into practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be something simple, and it doesn't have to be for publication. Here's the other thing about writing. You don't have to publish everything that you write. Go figure, you can write for the simple pleasure of doing it for yourself. One thing I've been thinking about lately is I keep putting it off, but I really want to start daily journaling. Just to put down my thoughts and things. And then at the end of the year, try and go back through, read it all and make some conclusions, and then maybe look forward to my next year. Do you know what I'm saying? And so that there's something, I think it'll be kind of fun. I think it'd be a really cool exercise. And it would also help me, as sort of as a communications person, it gives me analytics, right? It gives me data points. I'm measuring my year in a way, right? So that's something that you can do. And that's just
so there's
practice.
Yeah. And so I want to make kind of a distinction between two kinds of Masonic writing, because I think that there are two kinds. And the first one that we're all kind of familiar with is research, is scholarly research, right? And we have lodges of research in every state that kind of does this, and there's a Quater Coronati, and there's a Scottish Rite Research Society, and there's a Blue Friars, and we have a huge infrastructure. And it's interesting because I reached out to Sean Iyer, who's he's the editor of the Philalethes Society, and I asked him about like, what are your pet peeves when people send you manuscripts and stuff like that, and what I got back was very it was very it kind of comes from the point of view of sort of a professional academic, right? Which he is a professional academic. And so I totally get that. Then there's another, and so the idea behind research, scholarly research, is to shed light on something that up until now has sort of remained in darkness. So it could be the biography of somebody who, might have been important, who, Masonry informed their decision making or something like that. It could be, some kind of linkage to,
right,
between Masonic ritual and something in culture or in history or something like that. But it's
got an argument.
There's an argument to be made. I'm trying to convince you of something.
I always think of it, Eric, too. Yeah. I always think of it as like sort of academic writing. If you think of it as knowledge is a statue, right? That's being carved out of marble.
Yeah.
Your piece of research is a chip. It's just one chip in that whole statue. You're making that mark, but it's going to stay there forever because your chip was based on the chip that came before it, that came before it, that came before it. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that it builds up, and then, that dream of all dreams is that knowledge one day becomes the full statue, right? But it's just one chip at a time. And so that's always how I always think of like a research paper or something like that.
Yeah. And research has its kind of its own disciplines and its own demands, right? Which we'll talk a little bit about when we get to how. But the other thing is personal writing is which is not really research based, but it's sort of about how you interpret your Masonic experience. How has Masonry informed, like, what was your initiation like, or how did it change you as a person? How does it inform your daily life or your daily decision making? And I find that kind of first of all, the nice thing about that kind of writing is that there's no wrong answer, right? There's no one's going to say, oh, you failed to take into account the Regius manuscript poem of 1287. Right. Nobody cares about that, because this is about you and about how you relate to all of this. Right. And to me, that's a much better place to start. Because, of course, if you talk to professional writers, right, and say, what should I write? They always say, write what you know. And you know yourself to some degree. Right. So you could start with that. But so what you're trying to do with personal writing is you're trying to gain insight. Right.
That's right.
So
you're trying to find a relatable insight.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So something like, the Masonic ring that you wear, let's, the points in, points out argument, right? That's research, right? That would be a research paper. But what does it mean to
Right.
you? What do you feel
Right.
like when you see it every day? What is it when people talk about it, when people mention it?
Hmm.
How does
Where'd you
that,
get your ring?
where did you
Where'd
get
you
it?
get your
Right?
ring?
Yeah,
Why'd you
exactly.
pick it? Why'd you pick
Yeah,
it? What does it symbolize to you in minute detail? To you,
exactly.
not what does it say in, Madame Blavatsky's greater work. Tell
Ugh.
me what it says to you. Why do you wear it? Why even bother?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
What does it do for you?
to me is if you're the type of person who's always wanted to write but didn't think that you were either qualified or you had anything to say, start with start with what does masonry mean to me, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's, you know, I've always felt, and I'm gonna, I'm probably gonna like get a lot of like, what are you, crazy? But I've always felt like that should be part of your catechism.
I
I
agree.
feel, so like you're supposed
Yeah.
to, in many continental styles and in certain lodges in the UK, you're required to present a paper
Hmm.
to get to the next degree. And I've always felt
Correct.
like, just a degree is like, what did the second degree teach me? How is my life different having gone through
There you go.
that? Right.
Right.
That to
Measure from
me is
point A to
like
point B and tell me why there's a difference.
sorely needed. Not enough of that.
Absolutely.
Right.
I agree. I totally agree. Um, you know, and in my opinion, this is just going to be Jason on his soapbox, unfortunately, but there is not enough feature writing in masonry. There's not enough. There's tons of people who all want to be scholars and want to write scholarly stuff. There's tons of people, but there's not enough people who want to write um, about masonry, about the experience of masonry, about the culture of masonry. Um, just selfishly, that's what I'm interested in. And I find it very publishable in my magazine. And um, and so when I talk with an author about an idea that they have, I will push them on stuff and say, no, 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 I want more of this, I want more of that. I see my role as almost like a conductor. I interpret the music that's given to me, and I let the musicians know, who are absolute professionals and trained and know what they're doing. But I let them know, no, no, a little more, and I need you to come in a little harder on that one. It's tweaks, it's little things like that, and um, I think that's what feature writing is all about, which is a journalistic term. And I'll tell you, who to go to see really good feature writing? Chris Hodap. His blog is great feature writing. Chris is a terrific journalistic writer. He writes in a journalistic style. It's very heavy feature writing style, but he does a really good job at it. He does a really good job at it. So if you want to look at something that's easy to read, relatable, it hits the beats very well. Chris's writing is terrific stuff to bone up on.
And so you mentioned the term feature writing. So what are the characteristics? What does it mean to be a feature
All
writer?
right, so we'll go back to journalism 101, which is, journalism is simply a trained uh, uh, observer, right? A journalist is an observer
Uh-huh.
who interprets news or something newsworthy and writes it and delivers it to a larger audience, right? He digests it. Not everybody can be at the Cornerstone Laying, but one person who was there can watch the whole thing, take notes, and then write a narrative about it later. And it'll feel like everyone's there, right? And so that's what journalism is in its essence. What feature writing is a little different than journalism. I mean, it's still generally a true story. It's not a work of fiction. Feature writing is a little bit longer. It tends to be a little bit more creative in its delivery. Journalism is very just the facts, ma'am. And it's written in a style called the inverted pyramid. The most important stuff is at the very, very top, and the most important information, period, comes in the first sentence.
Mason bites dog.
That's right.
Right.
And if you read the first sentence, you should be able to get the totality of the story without going any further, right? Everything else just colors in and feeds in to that. Whereas feature writing generally is in a longer form, and it might not get to that point right away. There's some feature writing that features something called a nut graph. And the nut graph is a paragraph, generally about the third paragraph into the story, which gives you the nut. What's this whole thing about anyway? And that there's a paragraph that actually describes what the whole story is going to be about. But it's called the nut graph because you don't get there directly from that first sentence or that first paragraph, but rather a little bit in the nuts at the center. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's a common technique. There are other techniques. There's documentary style writing, which is a whole cool genre called the new journalism, pioneered by a guy named Tom Wolfe, who wrote The Right Stuff. Right there. Sorry, right there. The Right Stuff is actually written in a documentary form, where he collected he did interviews with all the people that were involved in the Apollo space program, right? And he took all those interviews and all of that transcription, and then he found major events that were in the meta story of the Apollo program. And he would take each of those major events and then just give the portion of the interviews that talked about that event, but all in different viewpoints. And he'd slap one, then another, then another, then another. And so it would feel like cameras switching on the same scene, but from a different viewpoint. And what's interesting is that everybody remembered it kind of the same, but they're all different according to their character, who they are. And that comes out in their telling of the story from all these different angles. And it's fascinating. It's a really cool thing. It's an advanced technique, but it's a really cool one. So that's feature writing in a nutshell, right? It's a little bit more than a news story. There's not a hard angle to it. It's just more of feature writing is your feel good stories in the paper. It's the Weekender magazine. That's all feature writing. Magazine writing for the most part is all feature writing. There's very little news writing.
So
maybe
it does it come more out of like personal experience? Is it?
It can come from anywhere. And that's the beauty
I'm
of
just trying to figure
writing.
out, like, if I were a Mason who had never written before, like, like what are how would I recognize feature writing?
It's longer. It's not news writing. It's not research. It doesn't have footnotes, unless they're ironical. I do have some things that I've written that I've put footnotes into, but that's, feature writing is more, it's more around the subject. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not about the subject right there.
Uh-huh.
It's around the subject. It's the periphery of it.
So it could be like the first time that I went to Masonic Week, or
sure, exactly.
Here are the people as a Grand Lodge. Like, here's what it's like to be at Grand Lodge.
Right. Here's this is what it was like meeting my mentor for the first time. Here's what it was like getting together with a bunch of other guys from the lodge, outside of lodge, to do a charity project. Here's the charity we chose. This is why, and this is what we did, and this is how we felt about it. This is how we became closer to each other and better men through that. Right? That's interesting. Everything news-wise and feature writing answers questions. That's the interesting thing too. It is everything answers a question.
Okay.
You've just got to figure out what those questions are, right? Because what does the reader want to know? Well, I want to know how you feel. I want to know, how did you change your mind about something in Masonry? Did you always have one conclusion and then you came to a different one. Well, how'd you get there? Tell me about that journey. That's interesting. That's compelling. And that moves the story forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's also interesting about feature writing is that there's a bunch in common actually with improvisational theater, right? So in improvisational theater, the first rule is never say
Play
no.
it straight. Oh.
Play it straight. Never say no. Never say no. If a character comes up to you with an absurd situation and says something to you, you don't go, well, that's stupid. Scene's over. We're all done. There's no other place to go, right?
Right.
So that rule is always say yes. Yes, and. You said yes to their suggestion. Now, how did you move it forward? And then they can say yes, and. And it's a recurring theme in improvisational theater. It's a recurring theme in your writing. Yes, and. Okay. And? Where are you going? Where are you taking me? So.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
makes sense?
Makes perfect
Too much
sense.
rambling.
So things like
Okay.
and there's a lot of things that Masons want to know that Masonic research is not going to tell them. For example, how do I get more people to show up for meetings? So any kind of success story.
Right. Sure. How do I cruise for the best Masonic antiques?
Yeah.
What are cool Masonic antiques, and where can I get them?
Yep.
Where do I find cool, rare books that are really fun, that are interesting? Who do I go talk to that's an absolute character that really knows their books and can start me on a hobby? I'm just starting. I want to know, what do I do next? Okay, well, who do you ask? Go find a resource, and then write about it. Tell everybody else about that resource. They love that.
and here's the thing, like editors like yourself are starving. I can tell you, like, the Masonic Society would love to get a paper, would love to get an article, 1,500 words or so,
Absolutely. General rule of thumb is about 700 words with pictures is a page. 750 plus a picture or two is a page in a magazine.
And that sounds like a lot, but it really isn't.
It's not. It's nothing. It really is nothing. I could write 500 words.
What I do is I never look at the word counter. Never. I never do. I just write until I'm beating a dead horse, and then I stop writing.
People ask me, "Oh, what length do you want?" And I say, "Pieces are as long as they need to be. If it's too long, I'll help you cut it."
You're a nice editor.
That's absolutely right. Because here's the thing: is that freedom is what gets you to the place you need to be. Your first draft, and I see it as your first draft. I'm not telling you that, but I see it as your first draft. Your first draft is probably going to be too long, or it's going to be too short. But that's why I'm there, is to say, here's what I want more of. Here's what I want less of. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, that's my job, is to interpret that. I'm the reader, the first reader, the informed reader of your stuff. And then I get to tell you, this isn't what I want. Like, this isn't interesting to me. Make this better.
I can tell you, as someone who writes, like my policy is, give me a word count and a topic, and I'll write whatever you want. Right. Just give, and if it's, hey, we'd like you to speak at our blah, blah, blah dinner or whatever, just give me a time limit. Say, we need you for 20 minutes on, this kind of topic, or 20 minutes, you pick the topic, or, whatever.
Right. And my thing is just write until you're done. Send it to me. I'll figure it out from there. That's my job, is to figure out, from your rough statue, how to round those lines off and make sure that it's perfect. I'll polish it when it's ready.
And let me tell you, nothing is as good as when you get somebody who presents a feature article as a paper at an AMD dinner or is Lodge Education, as opposed to Masonic research. I mean, man, there is, like, John Willendorf, Freemason. He was a famous member of our lodge who was a very prominent merchant in the 1870s. Like, oh, please, I'm gonna die of boredom here.
The best lodge program that I've ever seen, bar none, was I hate myself for not remembering his name. He's a British guy who's a member, a younger British guy who is a member of, I think he was a member of Old Number Two. Um, he was our age, but I want to say his name might be Jason. I don't remember. He came in, was very early in my Masonic career. I mean, probably like the first few months of being a Master Mason. And he came to our lodge and gave a presentation on the parallels between the third degree and on one side, Jungian psychology and the collective unconscious, and on the other side, the hero's journey. And he illustrated all of that by saying, okay, first, let's do some identification stuff with Star Wars, because that's literally the hero's journey. It's an absolute ripoff. And so it's super easy to identify those things. And then he went, all right, now that you've got your touchstone, let's now do it in Masonry. Now let's do it in something you probably don't know anything about, and that's Jungian psychology. And it was fascinating. It was amazing. And my mind was blown by how cool it was, and really pushed me hard to read a lot of ridiculously difficult stuff about Jungian psychology. That's super crazy, but it was really fun. And so that's what that's what we're aiming at, right? And that's a great lodge presentation. It's a terrible magazine article because you can't talk about anything Masonically in it, which, you know, kind of is the whole point here, is we're writing about Masonry. But it's that's what, again, we're looking for, right? Something that's got a touchstone that's a little bit more colorful, a little bit more pizzazz to it than in 1784.
Okay,
George Washington marched to the Capitol with his gavel,
that Bible,
and his cornerstone.
Can I learn more about that Bible?
Can I learn more about the gavel? Please tell me more.
Okay, so that's what to write. Let's talk about how to write. Like, how do I get started if I've never done this before?
Here's a great one, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about a couple techniques. All right. So I'm going to follow along on an outline because I am prepared. That's what I do. So first and most important step, right? Understand what you want to say. That's it, right? First step, figure out, what do you want to say? Develop your topic in an outline before you start writing stuff, before you start, pounding away on a keyboard and writing sentences. Just give an outline, give a basic outline, bullet point it out, put it in numbers, whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's an outline.
Mm-hmm.
The frame.
And what I like to do too is, like, when I start the outline, I put at the top of the page, people have like very, very short attention spans. So
that's right.
What's the one thing, if they could only remember one thing from that article, what would that thing be? And you build everything around that.
Exactly.
We need
everything
more
else
Masonic education every meeting. That could be the
right.
That could
that's
be
right.
the thing.
Now illustrate that. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's what your outline does, right? Is that it gives the most important little thing, and then it develops it, right? And it creates sort of a lattice or a framework around which you're gonna fill everything in later with a bunch of words and flowery things. Mm-hmm. But we're not there yet. So you need to test your outline, right? When you're done with your outline, then go back through, look at that outline and go, does this make sense? Am I getting from point A to point B? Does this make sense how I get there? Right? Test drive that thing in your brain. Oh, yeah, sure. It sometimes helps to do it out loud. It sounds crazy, and you're going to feel crazy in your own house doing it out loud, but read it out loud to yourself. Because as you read those things, if they don't make sense to you, you'll find out real quick and be like, oh, that I don't like that at all. I stumbled on that. That's weird. I don't like how that's there. And so test that and then move things around, right? If one thing doesn't make sense there, move it around, shuffle the pieces a little bit. Yeah. And often I find as you shuffle pieces, you're like, oh, that's nice. That is a nice little flow to it, right? And sometimes it's not a flow that says, like, I went point A, point B, point C. Like, this is a logical thing. Like a research paper is, I went from this to this to this to this. when you're writing about other stuff, you can bop around a little bit, you know. You can play with the structure a bit, and that's okay. And you can test out your ideas on doing that while you're in an outline phase.
So one of
Very
my
easily.
things is these, and I
Sure,
keep
there
a
you go. Yeah,
stack of these
cards.
at my desk all the
Yeah,
time. These are
absolutely.
3x5 index cards. And what I'll do, and I do this when I do, I do a lot of
Sure,
presentations professionally.
absolutely.
And what
Hmm.
I'll do is I'll put the main ideas, which then become paragraphs,
Hmm.
on these cards, and then sequence them out, and that'll tell you whether you're getting from point A to point B.
There you
And
go.
sometimes you'll be like,
Yeah,
oh, that's too abrupt of a leap. I need to like
yeah,
bridge the gap there,
right. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so
Oh,
sometimes like
totally.
just pasting it up on your wall, or
Yep. The
and
post-its.
they're good apps. One app that I like is
Absolutely.
the Post-it. Post-it has an app on
They do.
for iOS and the
Yep.
iPad. I think for Android too, but it's free, and it's a really good.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, those are all legitimate, wonderful ideas. However, you organize your thoughts, do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Write it down manually, do it in an outline, do it in post-its, and stick it up on your wall, or do it electronically through Post-it app. I mean, all those things are right answers. But that's exactly what we're doing, is we're trying to take main ideas and develop them and move them around to make sure that we're getting from point A to point B, right?
Okay.
So next step, and this is just as important as that first step in understanding what you want to say and developing that outline. The next most important step is understand who your audience is, right? Are they Masons or are they non-Masons? And if they're Masons, are they reading this thing in a tiled, like it's setting, like we talking about stuff here, or are we talking around stuff? You know?
I think the answer always has to be talk around it. Like
So that
I
so
originally
that's where I'm going.
okay.
Where I'm going with this is not just talk around it. It's best to assume they're non-Masons, right?
Yeah.
So explain
Oh,
it
and
all.
we do on this show always.
That's absolutely right. So explain it all. Um, one of the things in journalistic writing, and even this is going to sound funny, but in technical writing, one of the big things is stay the hell away from jargon. Don't use technical jargon. And if you do, make sure you define it very clearly what you're talking about. And then you can use it later, and it's great. But you have to define that for an audience. You have to assume the audience doesn't know what you're talking about. So it's really, really important that you explain that, right? If I'm talking about the Noahide legend, right, in my thing, looking back to the early ritual of the English, we find a different allegory given, but about the Noahide legend, which has to do with the building of the ark before the flood as the great, Masonic or craft project. And the physical building of that ark has symbolism about our lives and how we build ourselves. And so there you go. That's how you do that. That's a way around that technical writing, right? Okay. So best to assume non-Mason. That's always good. Um, Here's the other thing, right? Stick to a style when you're writing these things. It helps. This is a minor point on this big thing, but do you capitalize lodge? Do you capitalize masonry? Titles, senior warden, is that always capitalized, or just when it's the position without the title? Bob, comma, senior warden. Probably not. Probably not capitalized in journalism, but in our sense, we assign an importance to that role, so we might capitalize it. Those are niggling issues, but it's important to think about. Are you using AP style or Chicago style? That's going to dictate the use of the Oxford comma, the most divisive topic that's not related to religion or politics. Um, so, so
I'm a member of the Oxford Comma Liberation Front. So
uh, listen, I am too. I'm a convert, which again, there's no crazier zealot than the convert. Um,
this is an instance of jargon for people who don't know what the Oxford comma is. If you've got three things, right? Um, uh,
Right.
Let's see, the worshipful master, senior,
And junior warden.
and junior
No, that's a
warden,
bad. No, that's a bad example.
senior, or the worshipful master, senior,
Warden
senior warden, comma,
and junior warden.
and junior warden.
Right.
Right. The thing is do you add a comma before that
Before the
last
and.
and? Because if
Correct.
you don't add what was that thing that eats, shoots, and leaves?
Right.
Right.
That's correct.
So
Right.
so the panda eats, shoots, and leaves. Right.
Correct.
Did he eat and then shoot somebody and then leave, or did he
Correct.
eat, shoots,
right.
comma,
Right.
and leaves?
Right.
You know, it's yeah.
So not to bore anybody, but this is fun for me. The AP style, the Associated Press style, which is a giant thick manual of style that all journalists, professional journalists, write in, and have. I mean, that manual is drilled into your head in journalism school. They will beat you to death with it if you put an Oxford comma in something. And a lot of that style is actually dictated by the constraints of printed paper, which is hilarious. And it's meant to be the most efficient use of typographical space that you can get. So therefore, it eliminates that comma, because that comma is a point that you don't necessarily need. Your brain doesn't have to have that. It might jump over that a little bit and go, eat, shoots, and leaves. Well, it only makes sense one way. You know what I'm saying? Right? And so, yes, it's a little funny, but it makes sense. And that's all they care about. And they saved that point, because the news hole, meaning where the news is in a paper that's not advertising to support the news, the hole in which you put news into is very small, and it shrinks all the time because news is expensive and the advertising is what pays for it. And you want to get as much of that as you can to get the best news. So that news hole shrinks. So AP style is just a it's a reaction to those constraints.
Yeah,
you don't have that in masonry.
I would
right?
say, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the editor and I'm the writer, right? Is don't worry about that. Like, that's your editor's job, is to worry about whether it's AP style or not, for the most part.
Right. For the most part. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Your part is to tell the story in the best way that you can, in the clearest way that you can. And, commas be damned, and here's another thing. And while we're kind of on this style stuff and we're talking about some grammatical things, don't be afraid to just write. You know what I'm saying? Try and tell the story in like you were telling it out loud. And sometimes that means breaking some grammatical rules.
Jed on YouTube said 2 spaces after a period, and I felt a little twinge in my heart. Like, no.
So here's the terrible thing, is that I can't stop writing that way. I literally have to have a script in everything I write that takes out that stupid space, because it's just like AP style. It has been hammered into my head with a nail, and it's just pulling that thing out it's not going to happen. And so I just have to work around it. It is what it is.
I'm laughing because I used to be a typographer, and we would always get manuscripts that had yeah.
That's crazy. So here's the thing, right? So let's go back. So when you're telling a story, sometimes you're not going to tell that story grammatically correct, right? I'm going to stop a sentence with a preposition that leaves you hanging, or that's a narrative device. Cool, go for it. You do whatever you want. I'll make it work. That's my job. My job is to make it readable in a way that people understand it. You don't worry about that. You worry about telling the story. Just tell me the damn story. I'll get it right. And if I don't, and if you read it when I send it back to you and I go, hey, I made some corrections here, you go, ooh, I don't like what you did here. That's not what I was getting at. That's not the right emphasis. That's not the beat I was looking for. Here's the beat that I'm looking for. And then it goes, oh, I got it now. That's what working together, that's what collaboration is about. And we'll get to that. We'll get to the point, but it's a collaboration. Okay. So moving on. So now that you got your outline, you know who you're writing to, you've got a plan, right? Now explain your topic and maybe your solutions. Do you have I mean, is this a problem? Are you trying to address something, right? Now you fill in to your point. Um, you know, you want to fully expose your logic here. You want to be able to, you want to tell people where is this coming from? Why are you saying this to me? Where do you get this from? Because people want to know that, right? That's about you building authority as an author, and saying to them, this is why I'm writing this. Why you should listen to me. So you want to be clear about that what you're writing about. If it's a problem, what's the problem? What's the solution? Be really clear about it. And why are you the person that's giving me what the problem is and what the solution is? What uniquely qualifies you? And then provide context if there are references, which, sometimes there are, but whatever, but provide some context where applicable to that. Because that's really where this thing, that's the polish that makes it shine, is the context. Your outline, your form is what holds it all together. But the context and things that you fill in there, that's what polishes that story. That's what makes it shine. And that kind of goes to my next point, which is the color in your outline. So that outline is complete. You've got a nice narrative. You're going to try and now make it engaging, clear, maybe a little entertaining, right? Not all cough syrup has to taste bad. Not all Masonic learning has to be. And in 1875, President U.S. Grant, also a brother Mason, was present at the first raising of my lodge, Chippewa Falls Lodge, number 677. Anyhow, so what you want to do there is you want to provide anecdotes, which are sort of examples, but the anecdotes are usually more of a personal story as an example, right? A little bit more informal than an example from a scholarly work. Give hypotheticals, but be careful with hypotheticals. They drive people nuts. And a lot of times hypotheticals undermine your own argument. So you got to be really careful with those when you're giving them. But if you give a hypothetical, play devil's advocate to yourself. Do it right in the article. Show people that you've thought about this and that you're not just gunning and going and saying, yeah, I didn't even think about that, that part of it. Analogies are going to show an audience, right? They're going to relate the unrelatable with an analogy. It's like this. This feels like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can't relate what it feels like when you walk in the door for your third degree and what it feels like when you're sitting in that lodge afterwards.
So you bring up something really important, right? which is that, and I apologize, I'm going to go a little bit off kilter here, but it's that qualifying language of it seems like or it feels like, right?
Sure.
So I've got, like, at this point in your writing exercise, right, I've got 4 rules that I'd like you guys to follow as you're writing, right? So
all right.
Rule number 1 is be careful about extrapolating personal anecdotes to the greater population. So if you're trying to convince me that alcohol should be served in U.S. lodges, right? You can say that I've been in lodges in the UK where they do serve alcohol, and it didn't seem to bother anybody. That's fine.
Right.
But to extrapolate that and say nothing bad can ever happen because I never saw it, right? That's a totally different kind of kettle of fish, right?
Nothing bad
that would be
ever
number
happened
1.
With the addition
Number
of alcohol.
2 is watch out for logical fallacies and cognitive biases, and that's a whole show on its own. But you can just familiarize yourself when you start writing. A good editor will help you spot those. 3, and this is especially true of Masonic writing. Try to avoid being preachy. It's hard to do, But a
That's a
lot of
great.
times,
That's great.
right? A lot of times, like we're sending a message, but you know, if you're especially if you're frustrated or you feel really passionately about something, it can get the temptation to be preachy can sometimes be overwhelming, and
Hmm.
it just turns people off, right? Just to
Correct.
kind of like you're not doing it right, like, or in my day
Right.
we did it, blah blah, blah. That's
There you
sort of the
go. Uh huh.
right the
It's
grumpy
the old
past
past
master.
masters. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that's
And
great.
then fourth and probably most important is cite your sources. If you
True.
talk about a study, quote the study.
Correct.
Don't just accept it on faith that you read
Sure.
somewhere that studies show that blah blah
Right.
blah blah blah. Go back and find the study that they reference and
Let me.
read the
Let me.
study and make sure that the study is saying what the author said, so when you quote it,
Let
you're
me.
not gonna end up with egg on
Yeah.
your face.
Okay. And let's make that broader in a sense, right? Because that's a very researchy thing. But let's make that broader and let's say if you say I was once told, okay, by whom? Tell me
And you don't
who
have to
told you,
and you don't have to name them
when,
by name,
why.
but like a
You don't,
prominent past
but
master
you
of my
need to.
lodge,
There you go.
or
Right. Yeah. You have to cite your source, right? Because then as a reader, the best thing that you can do is past master of my lodge, Paul J. Nadeau said, and I give a whole quote. That's the best. That's the ideal. But sometimes the situation dictates a little bit of more of a delicate touch. I was told by a certain past master of my lodge when I was a young mason that I was not allowed to step foot into that lodge until I was a master mason. Right? That's an embarrassing thing. Well, calm down the attribution, but you still got to give it. You still have to bring me along. Not just some guy told me that, because then, I mean, what is it? The guy in the lobby? Did he say that? Was it some dude on the street? I don't understand why you're not in lodge. So good point. Totally. Those are four amazing points. This is great.
yeah. So those are my four rules.
Okay, that's awesome.
Okay.
So uh, are you done?
Yeah.
You're done. Okay. I just want to finish up on this to color out quotes. While we're on this subject, quotes. Give quotes. Um, they provide facts. They give you support, and certainly add a lot of color to things because they bring other characters in to your narrative,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a good thing. Um, you can use humor. Be really careful. There are very few people that are good at it. And it takes a very specialized type of writing to be funny. And frankly, most people can't do it. It's really hard.
Even people who do it sometimes can't do
Yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah. And miss hard, I mean, Dave Barry, who's probably one of the best humorists, most well-known humorists around, misses, and you can read stuff of his and go, no, not so much. That wasn't
Yeah. So
funny at all.
this is part of my brag reel, but my nephew,
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely.
yeah, he occasionally writes for the Onion, and did like a fellowship there, and
Yeah.
he was telling me that they pitch 60 headlines a day. Every writer there pitches 60. So that means that I think, I don't know, they've got 10, 12 writers. They're going through like 300, 400 pitches a day to get to that issue, right? So there's a
You
lot
wonder
of
why
stuff
it's
that,
well, here's the thing. You wonder why it's that funny because they're throwing so much into that grinder that
yeah,
what comes out is prime grade A.
that's
I mean,
right.
that's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. Here,
Yeah.
here's
I can't come up
another.
with 60 anything a day.
Well, right. Here's another great one is that you look at what I personally consider the paragon of humor writing, which is early National Lampoon, and you're talking about people who should have been high-powered attorneys and doctors, graduating from Ivy League schools, and even that stuff. There's some stuff that just misses, and that's just not great. And so like you got to be careful. It's a hard business. So humor's a tough one, but try it. as long as you're giving it to an editor, and you're not just getting click post, go for it, man. And then last, and I think this is really super, super important to fill in. Okay. This is super, super important. Illustrations. I want pictures, I want drawings, sometimes video, right? If it's online, I want video. I want visualization of your story in some way. Do not ever, ever hand in something that doesn't have visuals. And don't put them in line. Don't think you're clever and you're going to make a really cool, I'm going to throw it in there, in line with stuff. And I'm going to say, see picture below and stuff like that. Cause I don't care. You're not a graphic designer. You're not laying it out. You give it to me at the end. My professional graphic designer, who is really good at this stuff, he'll do it. And he's much smarter than both of us combined. So, but it has to come with images. It has to.
So what if you're not an artist or don't like
find one? You'll find something and you'll work with me, or you go, gosh, I just don't know. And then I'll read your thing and I'll come back to you and go, here's your project. You need to go fetch me X, Y, Z, and that's how you do this.
So here's what I would advise someone who has been a graphic designer for 25 years. Sketch it out on a napkin. Like, don't worry about the fidelity. So there's two things that when you're talking about a visual, there's two things you want to balance. One is fidelity and one is resolution. Fidelity is how close to the experience is that thing. Fidelity is about how well does this communicate the point that I'm trying to make, right? So a while back, I wrote an article for Phil Lathes about ritual, and I had this thing called the ritual framework. And, I know my way around Adobe Creative Suite. Sure. And so I was able to kind of whip something up, but what we're looking for is something that communicates the idea, that moves the idea forward.
That's right.
If all you've got is a napkin and a Sharpie, do that because they can hire an illustrator. They can go find somebody who knows how to draw.
And here's right. Exactly. And here's the other thing too, is sometimes when you do this, I look at it and go, damn, that's really funny. Like, it's really cool. It really works with the story to just have your napkin drawing. I'll photograph that, make it look really cool, and I'll throw that in there. Yeah. Because it's awesome.
Can I tell you something? So I was like me, I'm a complete smartass. So I was in business school and we were doing these, we would have to, in business school, you have to present case studies all the time. Yep. And so we're presenting this case study, and the professor said, well, I'm not going to grade you on the math, just back of the napkin stuff. We did the entire presentation on napkins. We went and to a bar, amazing, right? We stole a stack of napkins. We drew everything out in Sharpie on the napkins and took pictures of it. And that became our PowerPoint.
So a friend of mine, when he was in law school, he actually he had written an article about the art of negotiation as he's learned it from a Y3 law student, whatever. And so their project in law school was they were paired off and they were to go and negotiate a certain deal together. And they could do this whatever they wanted on whatever time they wanted. But the project was to write the experience down from both perspectives and then to present what the actual deal was to the class. So my friend, what he did as part of it is that they went to a local bar. And before they got there, he went in and literally stole all of the napkins off the area where they were going to sit so that he knew they wouldn't have anywhere to write something down to keep their thoughts on if they didn't bring it themselves. And it was just a negotiation tactic, right? And so he did this and then wrote this magazine article about the art of negotiation, and it had a picture that he took later of just an empty bar napkin holder. And it was just that, and it was hilarious, and it worked so well with the story, right? So I controlled the entire environment around this, and it was incredible. And you're like, oh, it's just genius, and it's such a simple thing. So this is what we're talking about, right? Illustrate your story. Tell me why, and pick those touch points that are important to the story. There might be little things. I mean, that's a little thing, but it's important. because it illustrates a bigger point within the context of your story. So, um, here's a good one too. Know when to quit when you're doing all this. Know when it's enough. That's harder than it sounds, and I don't want you to take this and say, well, I just don't know, and so I'm not going to turn it in. When I say know when to quit, have a logical endpoint, I guess. Make it clear to the audience who's reading it that you're done, that it's over, right? You do that either by wrapping it up a little bit. If you've started with the idea of something that's incomplete, a journey that's been started at the front of this thing, make sure I understand the journey's over and that the goal has been reached.
Yeah, so I had someone teach me how to do that, like in a foolproof way. So
Cool.
I do this, like I'm like a completely crazy writer, and I write the way that I wrote in high school. But
Yeah.
but what I'll do is I'll have my introduction on one sheet of paper, and my
Okay.
exit on another sheet of paper, and then the body of it goes on however many pages it goes. But I keep them separate, and so to enter the paper, you start with something that is universal to everybody,
Mhm.
right? And then you narrow it down
Right.
to your specific
go.
area of focus, right?
Uh-huh.
And then when
Uh-huh.
you leave the paper, you do the opposite. So
There you go.
you end your last fact. You say, okay, so this is important because, and then I think sometimes this is called a denouement, right? Where you kind of wrap
It
up
is.
the story,
That's
right?
correct. Yeah, absolutely.
And so and then you sort of you have to kind of relate it back to something that everybody can kind of relate to. So cornerstones are important because they do what like you can give me a whole thing about cornerstones in American society and how it really sucks that we don't do cornerstone ceremonies as much anymore. Why are cornerstones important, right? Cornerstones are important because they do this for people. They give them a sense of whatever, and that does what? That
Right,
gives
there you
us
go.
a sense
Right.
of community and continuity.
That's right.
Amen.
So
Boom.
there's a whole bunch of there are a whole bunch of techniques. There are mirroring techniques, right? Where you say, in the beginning of the thing, there are many things about cornerstones that are cool. Whatever. At the end of it, as you can see, there are many cool things about cornerstones.
Alfonso
mirrored.
Candero says RGB or CMYK for pictures doesn't matter. That's for the
Doesn't
graphic
matter.
designer to worry about.
Yeah.
And there's tools. There are tools to
I
handle
will
that.
say this. I'll say this. 300 DPI or better. That's all I care about. 300 DPI or better for print. 150 DPI for web. And really, if it's video, give me pressed on compressed MP4s. That'll play back at 1080p. That's what I care about. Right?
Yeah. And
you want the numbers? I just gave you the numbers.
Yeah. I would say as an author, don't worry about it. Like
exactly.
your editor will tell you what they need, but those are good general rules of thumb. But don't let. Here's the thing: I don't want things like RGB or CMYK to prevent you from writing could be a really interesting, brilliant article.
Right. If you started your article with "Call me Ishmael," now CMYK or RGB, that's just write the damn thing.
Yeah,
it's gonna be good.
Right.
By the way, that's the greatest opening in a book. Period. I think.
Do you know about what is it? The Bulwer Lytton Awards.
Mm-hmm.
So Bulwer Lytton wrote. He was the one. I think he started a story. It was a dark and stormy night.
Oh right, yeah, okay. Right,
and so
sure.
what the Bulwer Lytton Award is it's the first line of a book that is like it's the worst, the most awful, terrible. Yeah, just
see. I'm a huge first line geek. I love first lines.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes. I'm going to make a note of it now. Bulwer.
I love lead sentences. I love the challenge of the opening. It just makes me happy. The conclusion is much easier. It's so much easier to get out the door than it is to get in the door. Do you understand what I'm saying? like getting your reader hooked is way harder than telling them, "Hey, it's over. Thanks for coming. tip your waitress on the way out. So, and that brings us to the end of this little exercise, and that's review and edit. Get an editor. Don't do it yourself. Find somebody, find somebody that you trust, read your writing and edit it for you. That person doesn't need to be a professional editor. They just have to have some writing chops. And if they're not going to be,
and they have to read it every word of it.
Every word of it. Absolutely. And
your wife might not be the best person to.
Right.
That looks great, honey.
What you're hoping for is someone to read it from a reader's perspective, right? They're going to take it and they're going to go, does this make sense? And do I like this? Right? Those are the two questions you're answering right there. Does this make sense? Do I like it? And if the answer to either of those or both is no, they need to be able to explain to you why. That's really helpful, right? And so it just needs to be somebody that understands that a little bit. Ideally, you'll have someone who's really good at grammar as well, someone who's really good at spelling as well, right? So that they can get you through that part too. But that's a wish list. That's not a need to have. The need to have is someone who's going to read it and give you an honest, constructive opinion of it, at moving it forward, because then you're going to go back and you're going to take their notes and you're going to tweak and rewrite, and you're going to get back to them and go, better, and they're going to say yes or no. And so you've got to kind of do it that way. You should also ask them: is it economical? Right? Does it have length? Is the length commensurate with its clarity? Do those things fit? Right? And so it's really important because you can go on and on about something that you really love, but the person who's reading it goes, I really loved this at the beginning and I just don't care anymore. You just went on and on about it. And that'll help you economize that, right? So that you've got better clarity. And the really important thing to understand, every single human being needs an editor. Everyone who writes gets an editor. Everyone. Stephen King writes, goo gobs he writes. He can literally sit down and write an entire novel in a day. He did with The Shining. The Shining came out of his brain in one sitting. Think that through for a second. One sitting. And the thing is that he's got an editor, a really good one, by the way, who looks at it and goes, dude, you wrote this in one day, didn't you? And he goes, yeah, I had a great idea. And they go, yeah, I could tell. I'm going to go back through and I'm going to make some marks. And you're going to go back and you're going to correct some stuff. And the super, super important. And the thing is that that's a guy who writes professionally, really successfully, and he writes all the time. And he's stupid creative. And he still has people there to say no or yes, but. Do you see what I'm saying? And so it's super important to have an editor that's someone who can critique you and to give you feedback, because you need that feedback before you hit post. So that's cool. It. We're going to post. We're also going to post on this thing. We're going to post a 3 shortcuts to better writing. My shortcuts. If you don't want to listen to all, 8 hours of this conversation, here are the tips. Just do your research first, right? We talked about that. Make an outline and get an editor. Those are the 3 biggest takeaways that you're going to take away from this thing. Everything else is filler into that. Those 3 things, you do those 3 things, you're going to be a better writer immediately out the gate.
And the most important thing is write. Do it.
Yeah.
Do it. Put pen to paper. Start clicking the keys.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
Right.
And I'm going to leave you. I'm going to
call
leave
me
us.
Hiram.
Call me Hiram. With the Bulwer Lytton Fiction Contest, the grand prize for 2020 is
okay.
Her Dear John missive flapped unambiguously in the windy breeze, hanging like a pizza menu on the doorknob of my mind.
Wow, that is pablum. That's awful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Here's a special award. As hard-nosed PI Dan McKinnon stepped out into the gray, gritty dawn A bone-chilling gust of filth-strewn wind wrapped the loose ends of his open trench coat around him like a day-old flour tortilla around a breakfast burrito with hash browns, sausage, and scrambled eggs. Hold the pico.
Jeez, that's awful. All right. I've looked up my favorite opening, by the way, so that I can get it right, because I want to quote this. And my favorite opening is it's a movie opening. It's not technically, but it's written. I mean, whatever. But it's the movie opening. The opening to A Clockwork Orange is one of my favorite intros to anything, as it's so simple and declarative. There was me, that is Alex, and my three droogs. That is Pete, Georgie, and Dim. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And it's so nothing, but it is, to me, the epitome of cool. I just love those opening lines. And you pair that with the funeral march of Queen Anne on synthesizers that they're playing in the background. Oh, man, it's so cool.
All right, so let's do this. Yeah. So it is now September 7th.
It is.
You've got a month. You've got almost a month to figure out what you want to write about. Let's make October Masonic Writing Month.
There you go.
Everybody who listens to this, commit yourself to writing an article, and
long doesn't matter.
Does
not matter. Just write
something. If we all do that, right, there'll be thousands of pieces of Masonic content that can go into
be amazing.
Newsletters, magazines, podcasts.
I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you this, and this is my God honest opinion, and it is an unvarnished opinion. But again, my opinion. Almost all Masonic magazines are crap that are printed anywhere. Crap.
How do you really feel about it?
Listen. It's just a bunch of crap, and a lot of times it's the same crap that's printed over and over and over again. It doesn't have images. It's generally, here's from the Grand Master, which you have to do. That's fine. Whatever. The really good stuff.
Why are they terrible?
I've seen some. They have the tone and tenor of a 12th grade reading assignment. You have to do this. All right. Damn it. Do it, but I'm going to hate it. And I'm going to just write the intro paragraph that says, here are 3 things I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to give a paragraph to each of those 3 things. And then I'm going to close it with a conclusion that says, these are the 3 things I talked about. And it's just crap. It's just, it's uninspired in any way. The best stuff that I've read or that I've come across, the things that really get me jazzed about it are surprising, right? You're going to tell me something new that I didn't know that kind of shocks me. It's well written from the perspective of, I'm going to take you on a journey, right? I'm going to start here. I'm going to tell you exactly what the situation is. I'm going to walk you through a journey. And then at the end, we're going to have a conclusion. We're going to wrap this all up in a way that's really satisfying. Like, I feel like, I read that for a reason. That was really great. I could read that again, And there's been stuff that I've read that's like that. It's few and far between, though. I'll tell you that. And if you guys go out and you take this stuff seriously, right? And you just write, just do what you want to do. You're right. We're gonna find some really cool stuff in there. Yeah. And the thing is that not only that, but we're gonna give a start to potentially stuff that mark right out the gate, and that's cool. Like I'm all about that. In fact, fail miserably. Go write and fail miserably, because you're going to learn so much more from failing.
Fail. You won't fail. You're not going to fail. If you write something, something, you will not fail. And write something, but and then present it. All it needs to be is a 5-minute excerpt from what you wrote, or present it at your next meeting, or present it. I mean, good Lord, we're meeting over Zoom, right? We're all having to meet over Zoom.
Sure.
Let's inject a little content into that, a little insight.
Well, that's exactly right. Absolutely. 100%. Tell some damn stories.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's really good too. Tell a story. And we could do a whole show on telling a story, because that's a really interesting
Yeah, we might
subject.
have to do that. We
I
might have to
mean,
do that
it's
for
a
sure.
really interesting subject.
Yeah.
But at any rate, that's kind of where I'm going with this, is that I think that if we take some time to practice this skill, it's not an art, it's a skill. I think we're all going to be better for it, and I think you're going to get great stuff. And the thing is that then you won't get that newsletter and go, ugh, God, I'm going to have to go and look at. And it's always the same thing. It's always the same pictures, by the way. This drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Dude standing in a row.
It's an apron. It's a jewel.
It's a check.
Guy. Yeah, it's
a
check.
Joby. Come on. It's dudes standing in a row. I get newsletters from across the country and around the world, actually. And the one universal truth is dudes standing in a row. I do it. I have to. A lot of times that's all I get, right? And I scream at our poor Grand Lodge photographer who listens to me go, you give me people standing in a row, I swear to God, I'm going to put that camera somewhere where you won't be able to sit for weeks. And he's like, I, and I'm like, don't test me. Don't test me. So, yeah. Be creative. Go out and do something different, man. Break the mold.
Month of October, Masonic Writing Month. Do it. Do it. Don't question it. Just do it.
Make it happen, guys. Make it happen.
All right. This is the part of the show where we thank our executive producers. Thank you so much. Without you, the show does not happen at all. And if you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/X-Oriente and make a pledge. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Please remember, go over, if you haven't already, go to our YouTube channel, hit subscribe, hit the bell so that you're notified. I've noticed that there were some performance issues of simulcasting, so we'll try to get that taken care of for at least one more show. But we're gonna move the party over to YouTube, and hopefully it'll be a lot more interesting over there. Thank you to everybody who showed up: Alfonso, Jeff Woolsey, Andrew Stevens, Jed, whoever you are. It's Jed WBPM, who had some really fun things to say, and funny things to say. He sells hats for a living, he says, which is a person near and dear to my heart because I'm a hat person.
That's amazing. Write that damn story.
I know.
Write that now.
You might become our next guest.
Oh my God, I love that.
Jed, whoever you are.
It's amazing.
Anyway, thank you for showing up. Please stick to the Facebook page, and we'll let you know when the next one is. Hopefully next week, if we can get everything together. We'll try to be as regular as we possibly can. So until next time, everybody, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys. Fiat Fox.